Alrighty, we are back after a few hours of break. My internet should hopefully be working properly now. So let's get some people on for debates. Hello, and thank you for joining us. We're trying to do some debates. If you'd like to join and talk, give your opinion, give some pushback, let's do it. We are debating, should we cause total extinction and prevent more pointless and cruel suffering? Yes. We've got some already. Hello, how's it going?
Hello. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. Yeah, so obviously I can see where you're coming from with like extinction and stuff. And I respect like you're willing to debate people about it to defend your point of view. But I personally disagree with it. And I just wanna ask you some questions to see if it holds up logically without you contradicting yourself.
Sure.
So you're willing to do that, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're here for.
Alright. So on every question, I'll ask one question at a time, and you have to answer yes or no. If I say the word how, give a brief summary of like your reasoning behind your answer.
What if it's like a bit of a loaded question and, I don't feel comfortable with a yes or no and need to go into more detail?
Then you can explain.
All right, I'll try and stick to yes and no's for you then, okay?
Yeah, if it's like really complicated, then you can explain, I guess.
I'll try to stick to yes and no.
All right, thank you. Okay, so first question is, do you believe morality should reduce unnecessary harm and suffering?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think the interests
Sure.
and preferences of conscious beings morally matter?
They matter, sure, but not infinitely, right?
Okay. Okay. If a person like wants to continue living, would ending their life without their consent normally go against their interests?
Depends what you define as interest, right? Most people have survival instincts, so they would, fight to stay alive. But if a baby's about to be tortured or something, then even if they would want to stay alive, it's probably in their best interest not be tortured to death.
All right. Do you believe it is normally wrong to override someone's fundamental interests without their consent?
You have to look at it in context, but you should try to. So no, I'm going to go with no. Basically.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Well, I can stop there then, because you said no on that question. Your logic like holds up because you said infinitely as well. Like,
Well, you wouldn't respect a criminal's freedom to torture someone else, right? The police are constantly violating the consent of criminals, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you could argue that. So the thing is, right? What do you believe anything happens after death? Like, what's your view on that?
No, I'd say it's just non-existence. So safety from suffering.
Okay. And I think like a big obstacle you have to like overcome as well is the thing is like a lot of people have religious beliefs and a lot of people think that what happens after death, they're kind of scared of it, So like, do you have like a way to like reduce people's anxiety and stuff before you make them extinct or?
Potentially, right? Extinctionism is about doing the best thing and the right thing. So, we won't rush and settle for bad methods or something if there's a better method, unless it's for the sake of ending suffering faster, right? So we always have to bear in mind what's going to cause more suffering, what's going to cause less suffering, and there's the greater amount of suffering as well. So most people don't even consider wild animal suffering, so they're not actually looking at the greater picture. Extinctionism is about looking at that greater picture, considering the victims and how important it is to help them.
Okay, so you think?
So I mean,
No, go on, go on.
so just to finish quickly, yeah, I mean, we want to do the best for everyone, essentially.
Yeah.
That may result in some people suffering more as a result. But if it's in the pursuit of the greater good and the best thing that we can do, then that is just a result of the awful situation that we're in, right? Forced existence, terrible conditions, extreme suffering. We're not in a good situation, really. So there's lots of suffering, even if we don't.
What's the definition of suffering then? Just like, if you had to give one, what would it be? Because I think people have different definitions of suffering, and like you're, it's lagging hard. Jeez.
Experiences
Hello?
you want to
Can you hear me?
avoid. Now, most people say, "What's a?"
Sorry, you lagged out. You're lagging like really hard.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, I think my internet doesn't like Chinese IPs or something. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, one example of extreme baby.
You're lagging a lot, man. I can't really.
Better?
Speak again, please.
One is
You're lagging a bit less.
This is my internet to do that.
Wait, could you restart the live and could I join again to like continue my argument for a little bit, please? Oh, that's better. That's better. Okay, you're back now.
Right. Yeah. So one of the most prolific examples that you can see everywhere, and one of the biggest examples is baby animals being eaten alive.
And do you think like that's when you say being eaten alive by who? Humans or animals itself or both?
It mostly happens in nature by other animals.
But the thing is, right, with nature, I have a question on nature then, for you, because I have a different like perception on nature and suffering, things like that. So do you think like nature, I'll ask a few questions, same as before, same like structure. So do you think in nature things happen according to rules? So for example, like gravity, like universal laws, Yes or no?
So I mean, yeah,
Like basic
people say this all the time, like that's just nature, right? But that's just prioritizing a word over the actual victim's suffering, right? So it doesn't make sense to value the content of the victims.
I haven't finished yet. Wait. I've almost finished. It's a few more questions.
Sure.
Do you think causes lead to effects consistently?
Yeah, we believe in determinism. We don't believe in free will at the pro-extinction movement.
Okay. Oh, okay. And do you think patterns repeat and therefore nothing is accidental in nature, or not? And when I say nothing is accidental, I mean like because it came from something else, like causes lead to effects.
As opposed to what?
Like in nature, like a domino effect, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's how I see the world, right? Domino effect.
So my perception on nature is that I believe it's rational, and nature in itself is good and providential because the universe is kind of alive in a sense, and like therefore suffering in nature isn't really suffering. It's just on the whole, right? It's for the greater good, even suffering in an animal suffering. So how would you like? Do you really have a counter for that argument? I know it's kind of subjective, but
Yeah, I mean nobody should have to suffer, right, and be tortured. There's no like justification for it.
surely that's necessary in nature though. Like you can't even if you were to do this extinction thing, right?
Necessary for
Eventually,
what?
what'd you say?
Necessary for who? Not for the victims.
No, in nature itself, suffering happens, it occurs anyways. So even if you do this extinction thing, what I'm trying to say is eventually when nature comes back, because it will, you know, suffering.
Extinctionism is about preventing that from happening as well, right?
But the thing is, I'm saying like, surely you're delaying the inevitable because like in nature itself, there is suffering, right? And you saying, I get what you're saying, you're trying to eliminate that suffering. What I'm saying is, even if you eliminate that suffering by defeating nature, nature will come back and they'll be suffering again. So
Well, even if that did happen, and we'll do our best to prevent it from happening, we'd still be preventing lots of suffering in the meantime. So extinction is always a good thing.
always a good thing. Wow, that is a big statement to say.
Well, if we prevented 1 billion years of suffering, right, that would definitely be a good thing for the victims who would benefit.
Okay, but if nature is if things happen in nature for like the greater good of nature, right? Like forest fires in the woods, for example, right? In the natural ecosystem. Those things for trees in the moment are bad, right? You say if the tree was alive, as an analogy, is hypothetically, that would be bad for them, right? But in the grand scheme of things, in nature, what I'm trying to say is that's good. And if you apply that to the universal scale, then you're technically overriding that part of good.
Nature doesn't have feelings, though. It's just a system of where life arises out of it.
But the things that happen in nature, within nature, the things that happen, like,
Things that happen in nature are terrible.
okay, that's the main reason you're getting to that point then, because a lot of other people like would disagree, because some people think nature's rational, like me, for example. Like, I don't mean it can think or has emotions, but I mean like I believe it's providential, and stuff like on the whole is for the better of nature, right?
People might benefit from nature existing, but it's not fair to the victims, right? They don't benefit.
Yeah, but then you could say like you are also reducing like happiness and joy and life, like by you obviously, it's like a double-edged sword. But on the flip side, if you are reducing suffering, you are like reducing actualization of like people's potential.
Yeah, why should they get to selfishly, have fun? Why should a baby get tortured to death just so someone can, watch Netflix?
Yes, that's true. I mean, the thing is, right, I think it comes down to like how you perceive the universe. And the reason I think, like, even though I see where you're coming from with this idea, yeah, and your movement, there's nothing against it, but I just think the reason why it'd be hard to do it is because people have different perspectives on life and the universe. And I think
That's just a challenge that we have to overcome.
it's subjective, right? And because of that, it's a challenge which is maybe possible in the future with technology, but I think it will be very, very, very hard.
Well, the more we grow the movement, the more possible it will become.
So you believe like even you, for example, I'm not saying that you're going to kill yourself right now or anything like that, but as an example, you yourself, you would happily die for the greater good of less suffering, right?
Yeah, why should anyone selfishly, go about having fun while babies are being tortured, right? I mean, Extinctionists are people that say, I'm not going to ignore the victims and selfishly focus on my own pleasure. I don't think it's right that they're being tortured and forced to exist, and we should stop it.
Right. And you think you said I remember in the last live I think you said like talked about euthanasia, right? That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what like would you use that on everyone then? Like like ideally, or would some people have to pass away in like a painful way? Would you say?
I mean, it's hard to predict the future, right? But we're open to whatever's best and necessary, right, for helping the victims. So, we'd rather not get our hands dirty, and we'll try not to, and try to do the right thing for everyone with the utmost ethical consideration. But ultimately, it comes down to the greater amount of suffering, right? If you have to do something to prevent billions of years of extreme suffering and lives, terrible lives, then yeah, it mathematically works out for sure.
Okay. And then you said, wait, what was your definition of suffering again? Because you lied, so I didn't hear you properly, like before.
Experiences that you want to avoid, usually, especially when you're very uncomfortable and you really want to avoid it. But so you don't want to stub your toe, but you also don't want to be eaten alive, right? So it's very easy to understand suffering if you just try and more and more extreme suffering, which is realistic.
But aren't those experiences like you want to avoid? Are like experiences someone wants to avoid is based on their perception on the thing, right? For example, like if someone is, being robbed by someone, and their perception is that like like they're gonna lose all of their money and stuff.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Nah.
So the thing is about like this subjective avoidance of suffering, right? The vast majority of victims and sufferers on this planet are baby animals that die in cruel ways in nature. So they're not, rationalizing this. They're not thinking about it. They're not doing philosophy. They're just born and tortured and killed.
But that's a part of being alive, though, and you like delaying. You're just delaying the inevitable. That's what I'm saying. Like it does help short time, but eventually, what's the point if it's gonna happen again? Realistically.
Well, firstly, you can be reducing suffering, and secondly, we can try to make sure it doesn't happen again.
But if you're not there, like if you're not there to stop it from happening again, it'll happen again. So that's what I'm saying. Like,
Well,
yeah,
these are just questions and problems that we need to grow the movement to try and address, right? To do the best thing to reduce suffering.
yeah. So I think the main thing is that I think like suffering because it's based on perception. Like for example, suffering to me, like it's different to your definition, right? So because of that, it's like your argument for extinction or extinctionism, whatever you call it, is I just think because it's not objective, right? I don't believe it's like the right thing to do. That's my
I
opinion.
mean, we'd say it's pretty objective, I think everyone can agree that a baby being stabbed to death is suffering, right? Or eaten
But
alive.
but an animal you're talking about or a human?
Well, both, right? It happens to both. But if I eat a cat alive, I don't think anyone serious is going to say that it's not suffering.
Yeah, but you can prevent that in other ways by educating. Like if you eat a cat alive, you can prevent that by educating like people from a young age about like the world and shaping their perception instead of
But you
killing them.
can't educate wild animals not to eat each other.
Yeah, wild animal. That's part of nature, though. That's for nature on the whole. Stuff that happens within nature. What I'm saying, even if it's bad,
Yeah,
it's
but that's a
temporary.
bad thing. Just because it's nature doesn't mean it's unquestionable, right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, you're saying like, oh yeah, they're suffering, but that's just nature. Well, that's not a good reason to dismiss it, right?
But if it's good for the whole, then
But it's not. The vast majority, if you're talking about the whole, over 99.9% of life born on this planet, including humans and all animals, die a cruel and painful death after a bad life in the wild, because the wild animals, including insects and all types of life, are literally like over 99.99% of life on the planet, and most of them die. They're essentially food on legs, and they get ripped apart, eaten over the course of several hours, or maybe quicker if they're lucky. But they're starving. They've got parasites, diseases, brain damage, physical, mental problems, all sorts of terrible things, right? So the greater good would be 100% safety from being forced to exist and from extreme suffering.
But the animals can't perceive suffering as a thing anyway. So even by you reducing their suffering from your perspective, what I'm trying to say is like, even in the animals, because nature's good as the whole, even if the animal is suffering in your point of view, which I'm agreeing it is from your point of view, if they're being eaten alive and stuff. But from the animal's point of view, they can't think like us, so they can't perceive that suffering.
Exactly, they're the most vulnerable among us.
Yeah, but that's in that moment of them being vulnerable, it's still part of nature, and you trying to override nature.
Again, that's a non sequitur, right? Animals being tortured, and you're saying it's fine because it's nature. But why does it being nature make it okay?
Because nature's rational.
Prove it.
But you can observe it, and you can apply it. I'm not saying it fully is right, but I believe it is. And if you observe things on the earth, right, like forest fires and ecosystems, for example, right, if you apply that to the universe, it makes sense, right? So, I'm not saying, when I say rational,
babies getting tortured will never make sense ever. You can't make it make sense.
What, one person being tortured or one thing being tortured?
No, trillions of life forms are being tortured, right, every day. You can't make baby torture make sense, okay? You can say that happens because of nature, but you can't say that it should never be stopped because it's nature. That just doesn't add up.
Right, I think as well, if you're talking about humans, like treating animals bad and torturing them and stuff, I think that's from false judgments. That's not from them being evil, right? That's from them having the false judgment. What they're doing is right in the moment, in the context.
Yeah, humans can't be trusted to be responsible, right? I mean, they've had all of history to prove otherwise, and they haven't. And the vast majority of suffering happens in the wild, animals. So it's independent. Humans are essentially irrelevant to the majority of life on the planet and suffering on the planet.
Okay. So okay. The thing is,
it's simple. If you agree that babies shouldn't be tortured for any reason, then you should be an extinctionist.
No, it depends on the context. I think, because our point of view is very different, obviously, right? Because I have a very ancient Stoic point of view, and I'm
extinctionist. Babies being tortured is unacceptable, but other people, they find a way for it to be acceptable, and we're never going to agree with that.
Okay.
We should be on the side of the victims, right?
Yeah, but you should also be on the side of nature as a whole, though, right?
Why?
Because that's the thing that brought you to life, and you should respect it. You're not like a god. I'm not saying I respect it. What you're doing, I respect it, and I can see where you're coming from. But I just think it's just focusing on one thing and ignoring the whole, and ignoring the respect for nature. I don't think is the thing, because you're just the inevitable. Because I think
nature is a torture machine. So yeah, it's a terrible thing.
Yeah, but it's a torture machine. It's a torture machine for humans, not for animals. Because animals
have the worst conditions.
Animals can't perceive that torture as being bad because they just follow their impulses and desires, right? Obviously, I'm not saying
read and write about it, but they can feel the torture.
Yeah, they'll feel the torture, but them feeling the torture, they're used to it. That to them, that might not be bad, right?
So a baby born into the world has no idea what's going on, where he is, why he gets tortured and eaten alive.
That's a baby animal. Or
Yeah.
they, yeah, no, because they animals don't have reasoning like humans do, and I'm not saying that the pain they can't feel the pain, they can, but that's part of nature to them. They don't see that as bad in itself. So
How do you can't speak for all animals? There's trillions of different animals with different minds, different species, such diversity. To say that they're all fine with suffering is just absolute, just
but
junk.
no, I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying their human capacity of reasoning is higher than animals. We can agree with that, right? And I'm saying that from what we know of, and I'm saying that if you apply that, right, then they can't perceive torture as highly as humans can.
Well, I mean, you say that, but humans aren't getting eaten alive en masse, right? So animals are suffering far worse experiences than humans.
Sorry, say that again.
Animals are experiencing worse things than humans. People like to think that humans have a greater capacity for suffering, but we have coping mechanisms. Animals are in the worst conditions. They have no shelter. They have no security of food, no medicine, no euthanasia. They're hunted by murderous animals every day. Fearing for their life. That's why animals are so skittish, right? Because they think you're going to literally torture them to death, and because that's their reality in their day to day.
Yeah. So, okay, my last few questions is like you're delaying the inevitable, really. Because do you think that even if after this extinction thing, do you believe that life has a way of coming back in different forms?
Look, extinctionists aren't saying we should just eradicate all life on the planet. That's not what we're saying. We should make sure that there's no risk of life coming back. The majority of what our movement actually intends to do, the majority of the action that we are working towards, is prevention of life coming about. So, in the universe at large, the heat from stars and from the suns shining on surfaces and on planets is what causes life to come about. So that's going to be a serious challenge to find a way to prevent life from coming about as a result. Maybe we'll have to build Dyson spheres or something. Who knows? But yeah, we want to prevent billions of years of future suffering. The vast majority of the victims we want to help haven't come to exist yet, but they will exist and will be tortured unless we prevent it.
So you believe that you can eventually stop like new life from coming along?
That's what we're. No, the thing is, we're not saying we believe that we can do that. We're saying that it's our obligation to try and achieve that. In the same way that if you wanted to cure cancer, it would be crazy to say you don't have the cure now, so don't research it. That you've got it the wrong way around, right? You have to find and create the answers.
Okay. And if that because that's the main premise of like your organization, right, or one of them, right, or your movement.
Yeah.
And if I'm not saying it's guaranteed to fail, but if it did, right, then would you say that what you've done in the past, like trying to make everything extinct and it not working, that being pointless, or how would you view that if you knew that it could fail, or like you didn't know it but it did fail? Would you say that it was still?
It could fail, right? It could absolutely fail. Yeah, we have to try.
And if it did fail, hypothetically, would there still be a point in doing it in the first place? That's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, if it was guaranteed to fail, then it would be irrational to try, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks. Yeah. Just getting to know the movement more because it's my second time I joined the live yesterday, and I just wanted to hear your opinion on some stuff.
Yeah, feel free to keep watching. You can also check out our website, proextinction.com. We've got a full, lengthy, frequently asked questions page. We've got our manifesto with graphical image explanations and a bunch of text to read about it. Loads of resources.
Okay,
You could also
perfect.
join our Discord if you've got more questions. Just Google search "Abolish Suffering Discord." It's the topic.
Yeah, all right, cheers.
Great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Let's get one else. So, right, I am looking at the list of people requesting to come on, and I'm hoping that it's in order of who's been waiting the longest. So I'm going to go with Nate.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good. I think the answer to your prompt is no. I think that the antinatalist position is a little self-defeating when you consider the fact that, I mean, you would take like abiogenesis to be true, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if abiogenesis is true and this means that life can arise from, wet dry cycles and chemical progression, then it seems like if we end all life today on Earth, then it seems like it may come back. And if it comes back, then you're going to have to go through, well, you, and when I say you, I mean life, is going to have to go through all this process of evolution and then increasing their intelligence, philosophical deliberation. They're just going to have to do it all over again. So it seems self-defeating, but yeah. So like, I guess that would be what I would say.
I mean, that's a valid concern. Extinctionism is about, so like the tagline, or one of the taglines is kind of the most vast and thorough extinction possible. So we should do our best to help as many victims from being forced to exist and to be as thorough as possible with it, right? So we should do our best, right? So we want as high of a standard as possible for that certainty and to reduce the risk to zero or to as close to zero as we can. So you're saying we might fail, but we are going to try our best not to fail.
Okay, but I mean, guaranteeing that life will never arise again is effectively moot, considering that there are, billions of viable years between now and when the Earth is consumed. And that's not even accounting for other life that may exist, right?
Yeah, it's certainly a big task, and that's what we are taking on.
Okay. So would this be like, would this also apply to people who want to live? Like if they want to live, would you stop that if you had the ability to?
So, as it stands, we need humanity. If humans went extinct tomorrow, then there'd be no way to help other life, right? They would just be screwed. So, as it stands, we need humanity to stay strong, healthy, powerful, to support, to keep doing science and developing technology. 1,000 years ago, it would have been impossible to do extinction. Today, it's much more feasible. We've already made several species go extinct. Every day going forward, it gets easier and more possible.
Okay. So does that, but that doesn't really answer my question though.
Yeah,
Like,
sorry.
if someone wanted to live and you had the ability to make them stop living?
Yeah. So, yeah. So it comes down to the greater good, to safety, to minimizing risk, right? So if there's a risk that they're going to suffer terribly, and that they're not able to sort of do the right thing for themselves, or they're going to create other life that's going to suffer, which is what most life does, right? That's kind of one of the big problems, is that life is programmed to reproduce and to continue the cycle of suffering. So in that sense, you have to end that cycle, right?
So does that mean the answer is yes? Yes, given that they would suffer and they would also be likely to create life that would also suffer? That's the answer?
So like the thing is, if you have absolute non-existence, then you've got as close to 0% risk of suffering as possible. But if you start having, life forms running around and, they're not extinctionists. They're not responsible, or they're not trying to do the right thing. Just selfishly looking after themselves or whatever. Or if they can't be trusted, then you have to reduce that risk to zero.
Right.
For
Okay.
the sake
So like if you had a button and this button would, we can say kill, right? We can say that.
euthanize.
Euthanize. Okay. We have a button. This button will euthanize. Let's say it's a 5-year-old, right? This 5-year-old is in a pretty stable environment. It's pretty likely that they'll grow up and have kids. It's pretty likely that in the process of growing up, they'll suffer to some extent. You're saying you'd push that button, that you'd be in your moral interest as like part of this project to push the button, right?
That's a great question, actually. So let's think about this. So in this hypothetical, let's say that this baby is the only, or this child is going through life, and there's no other considerations. No other considerations, right? It's just about this child. We would say that their safety from suffering would take priority over any pointless and meaningless kind of fun that they might have in life, right? So safety it comes first, essentially. And what safety means is safety from suffering.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously I disagree with the prospect that we shouldn't make any other considerations relating to the well-being. I mean, I would stipulate that yes, while suffering is like something to mitigate, there's also kind of a beauty and experience. There's I like fulfillment. If you would just want to boil that down to preference fulfillment, that's fine. But I like being here. I'm sure a lot of people like being here despite their suffering. Here's a question: Do you hold that we ought to maintain some sort of agency? Like, if I want to live and you don't want me to live, like, who should have the final say?
The most rational and responsible ones should have the say, essentially. So, I mean, humans are really not that much more than animals, right? So, would you unleash an animal in hell or into hell-like conditions and say, it wants to live, so don't euthanize it, and then it gets tortured and suffers terribly, has a bad life? We shouldn't always just give unlimited consideration and respect to agency, right? And
But
humans
that goes both ways, though, right?
Say again?
But that goes both ways, though, right? Like, just because you desire to end my life doesn't mean that you should have that jurisdiction, should it?
I mean, governments at the minute have the power to give and take life as they please, right? So that's already the current system.
Well, yeah, but I'm asking what should be the case.
The case should be 100% safety from forced existence and suffering at all cost and any cost, right?
Well, that's kind of the thing in contention. I'm asking why we should like prevent any existence from occurring, the existence of any experience.
Yeah, because we have a world of extremely unsafe conditions, right? So if we were in heaven, then it might be a different conversation, right? But we're effectively in hell, so it's about preventing life from being born into hell.
Yeah. Well, do you think that we could make a distinction between struggling and suffering?
I mean, not when it comes to the vast majority of life, for the vast majority of life born on this planet, they die cruelly and painfully as children, right?
Well, I'm just saying, like, in terms of just a person living their life, there's a difference between an experience, like, getting hit by a car is a different experience than struggling with a math problem, right? It may be that like suffering can be defined as an unwanted experience, but struggling can be defined as some kind of difficult experience, right? And
Yes.
I think people like struggling with things. You know, not forever, of course. Like they don't like to indefinitely struggle with things, but I think that they do like to face difficult and overcome difficult challenges, and maybe creating a society where as little suffering takes place as possible is compatible with that goal set.
I mean, it's really just the lucky ones that benefit from being forced to exist. That it's as simple as that, right? They get to struggle and see the fruit of it. But the unlucky ones are getting forced into bad lives. They're too afraid to do anything about it because of their survival instinct and stuff like that, and they're essentially imprisoned in basically hell, right? Tortured for their entire life, and then met with a cruel death, a horrible death.
I don't think they're tortured for their entire life. I'm sure that there are
Many
probably
are.
some moments they
Many,
enjoy.
many are. Many are though. You're not thinking about
Yeah,
the
but
world.
like, but here's the thing: like, you're using terms like many and most, and you
Yep.
know, the whole time they're suffering. But I have a feeling that if there was any amount of suffering, you would also be advocating this position, right?
If there was any risk of extreme suffering, then yeah.
Okay, well, any risk of okay, so if someone was to live their life and they get basically everything they wanted, but then they like stub their toe once or twice, like that wouldn't be a life that you would say, well, they were forced into existence and they shouldn't be living because their existence is unnecessary.
I mean, creating life is something that should have the highest standards behind it, right? If you're going to create a life form, you need to really guarantee with literally zero doubt that it's going to go wrong and that they're going to have a great life, right? It has to be like literally 100%, and that's just not realistic. So, sure, if heaven, if you stub your toe every now and then in heaven, maybe it's not so bad, but that's just not reality.
Oh, sure, but you said if there's no chance of extreme suffering, then
Yeah, but there's always going to be
okay,
a chance of extreme suffering, right?
so what's extreme suffering then?
Just use your imagination, right? Like a baby being eaten alive, being tortured to death,
Okay.
someone with chronic depression or chronic pain, disease, babies born with brain cancer, schizophrenia, all this kind of terrible stuff that they were forced into, never asked for, and now they're imprisoned. And, people will just say, well, let them, do the incredibly horrific act of opting out, as they put it so nicely. Let them get tortured and then let them have to, do the unimaginable, right? Which is extremely terrible. So it's
But there but
not a
there's a
nice.
pretty large contingency of people that don't fulfill the criteria of extreme suffering, as you put it. Many people are healthy. Many people don't have these chronic issues.
The
Many
lucky
people go
ones.
on to lead happy lives that they were happy to have. And at the end of their lives, they say, I've lived a good life and I wish that I could continue it even longer. But alas, I must die because biology or whatever. So
Yeah.
it seems like your moral project here wouldn't account for their experiences. You would say, well, they must die too because they might create future people who do have those problems, right?
More or less, yeah.
Okay, then it seems like it's not extreme suffering that's the bar. It's the mere possibility of extreme suffering
Well,
10 or 15 generations down the line.
how would it be 10 or 15 generations down the line?
Well, I'm saying that like if there's a society of people and all of them live happy lives without extreme suffering, your next objection would be, well, we should still kill them because they might produce people who are prone to extreme suffering, down the line, whether it's the next generation or 15 generations down the line.
If they were, on the side of responsibility instead of selfish and irresponsible, pleasure just for the sake of pleasure and fun, people that are on the right side can, they've got a reason to be, right? They can be trusted. They're responsible, extinctionists, essentially. But those that can't be trusted to be responsible, or if they pose a threat and a risk, then yeah, we're going to think about the ones that they pose a threat and a risk to. So extinctionists always prioritize the victims, right? That's what responsibility is. It's the victims and the suffering, the bad things, have to be accounted for above all else.
It's not just the bad, it's the possibility of
Yeah.
bad things.
Absolutely.
Right. You're saying that it's because it's possible
Yes.
that people will, that some people in the future will have some level of extreme suffering. We should kill all people now, right?
Well, not kill necessarily, but so yeah, I mean, freedom to cause suffering isn't a good thing.
Right, but you're saying that because there's a possibility that extreme suffering will be caused, we should euthanize them or maybe make them infertile, forcefully sterilize, maybe?
For the sake of the victims and the potential victims, we have to look out for them, right? We have to do the best thing for them. Now, the thing is that the people that you're talking about, brain rotting on Netflix and ordering a pizza, that kind of stuff, it's just meaningless, right? It's worthless, right?
But does that constitute extreme suffering, though?
It constitutes a threat and risk of extreme suffering, like we just mentioned.
So does everything, though. Everything has a risk of extreme suffering. And by that metric, like, instead, if they decide not to bed rot and watch Netflix all day, then they could go rock climbing, and that would pose a possible risk of extreme suffering, right?
But if babies are getting tortured so that they can go and rock climb, then we're not going to agree to that.
We can, yeah, but the point is that we can have rock climbing without the extreme suffering.
Can you though?
Yeah, there's certainly not a contradiction entailed.
But there's a risk of it, right?
Yeah. There's also a risk of that not happening, I guess.
We have to reduce the risk to as close to zero or to zero if we can, for the sake of the victims, right?
Well, no, because this would be like, it would be like you're designing a circuit and you want this circuit to perform some kind of function. Let's say it's transmitting a signal, right? There's two constraints that you have to apply to the circuit. It's how much power it consumes and how stable the circuit is. If you make this circuit consume more power, it's more stable, right? Because the signal is more stable. But if you take this rationale and say, well, there's a risk of instability, therefore let's just not have a circuit at all, then you've kind of undermined like any possible progress you can make. There's no way to disentangle like what a circuit should or should not do. And, taking it back to the extinctionist example, it's kind of self-defeating given that life will come back. There doesn't seem to be any way to prevent life from occurring given a long enough time and certain wet-dry cycles and things like that.
So if I prevent a sadist from, having a child in a dungeon and, assaulting it to death, right? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I'd say that's a good thing.
Right. So that's what extinction is about.
Well, but in that example, there's effectively no good that can come out of the sadist having the child.
No, there is. The sadist is having the time of his life, right?
Well, but if you were to rescue the child from the sadist, then the child can be put into a life where they can have their own.
But what if you can't rescue them and they get murdered, right?
Who's to say we can't rescue them? We have agency. We have resources.
You can't guarantee 100% of safety for 100% of life without extinction. It's just physically impossible.
But you can't guarantee that they'll remain extinct either.
We can try.
We can try to make their lives better. There's no symmetry breaker here.
I mean, to say that, wild animals should keep being forced to exist into extreme suffering and being eaten alive when we can just stop it. Like we already are stopping it with deforestation, right? It's already possible. But, to provide godlike safety to them is unrealistic in comparison.
It's not realistic to guarantee that life will never exist in perpetuity, though. If you're like making an appeal to realism here, then there's literally no symmetry breaker between the two positions.
I mean, if you throw the planet into the sun or something, then there's probably not going to be any more life on the planet, right?
Sure, if we throw but if we have the resources to throw the planet into the sun, then we probably have resources to guarantee that nobody will suffer.
I would disagree with that. Right? We've debunked that massively on our series. Essentially, suffering is fundamental to sentience. You need positive motivators as well as negative motivators. If you remove all of the pain receptors from a life form, then they break all of their bones and don't realize it. Right?
So, okay.
Look, so actually,
Yeah.
let me answer that again. So, we extinctionists do support improving conditions, and if we can somehow get those conditions to, godlike safety and essentially just take everyone to heaven, then we can maybe do it. Yeah, but extinction is already possible. So it's achieving godhood. Seems far less realistic and feasible.
Well, extinction is possible, but perpetual extinction is not.
Why not?
Well, like I said, we have in abiogenesis, there are papers written about metastability. Metastability is kind of this concept of like, um, you know, uh, lifelike systems can emerge from chemistry, um, given certain conditions, and then, once you get into like autocatalytic loops, then the transition from chemistry to life becomes, well, almost arbitrary. Like the distinction between chemistry and biology becomes somewhat arbitrary,
I
right? So
mean,
then,
I
yeah,
don't think that rocks are suffering, right?
I agree. I agree. But the point is that like, if you have some kind of biological system that emerges out of chemistry, then eventually that biological system will become more complex, and then it'll start forming maybe not prefrontal cortexes, but something that's capable of suffering, right?
But again, even if that does happen, we're preventing much more suffering in the meantime. And we should definitely do everything we can to try and, solve the problem that you've posed, right? Again, humanity is only just started its venture into technology and science. We've only had the internet for like 30 odd years, right? So to say that thousands of years from now we might have a different perspective on all of this would be ignorant, essentially. So we're not saying it is possible, but we're saying that it's is good, regardless of the upper limits of extinction. Extinction is already possible. It's already a good thing. For example, agriculture and land use has already prevented lots of wildlife. Deforestation, for example, has already reduced animal population and animal suffering. So, just because the highest limits of the objectives aren't immediately provable to be possible, but they might be, doesn't mean that we can't, do smaller amounts of extinction, right? So we just need to do as much as we can and work our way up and see how far we can take it.
Okay. I mean, I think that we could just do the same thing, but in application to making sure that the lives are who are here, we can plan for the lives that are coming, and we can accommodate the life that is already here and reduce the suffering that happens within that life. And I think that people would be grateful for that. I don't I don't think we need to make the jump to, well, let's just abandon, this project that we've been creating for thousands of years just because people in the future might not be happy.
The thing about reducing suffering is that, if this is all of suffering, right? Reducing suffering might take it down slowly, slowly, slowly. But, all of these victims are suffering in the meantime. And if you can just end all of that suffering and you choose not to, then it's unfair to the victims.
What do you take fairness to be here? It's just people receive what they deserve, or
I mean, what's fair would be, 100% safety from being forced to exist non-consensually, and facing extreme suffering and risk of extreme suffering.
Uh, okay, so an aversion to suffering, but this concept of being forced to exist is, well, it's kind of
Universal, I would say.
right. Well, it's incoherent because there is no person. There's no being that's being forced to exist.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, there's no way to garner the consent of anyone before they exist, right?
Exactly. So it's non-consensual. Nobody asks to be here. They're forced into it.
Yeah, but they could leave at any time, I guess, right?
And no,
No, they can't leave at any time.
no.
Um, if I stop eating, eventually I'll be gone, right?
Do you think that would be an easy thing to do?
Well, nobody said it would always be easy, but if we're looking for easy things to do, then
Animals do that.
do animals
Can
commit
children do
suicide?
that? Can babies do it?
Well, babies don't
No.
really. No, but certain people can. At a certain threshold, you can stop.
Maybe the lucky ones, right? But even then, they're not really that lucky, because to get to the point where you're opting out, as you so kindly put it, disguising the true horrors of the experience, you have to suffer so overwhelmingly badly, right, to get to that point. And to then do that horrible act is also, possibly one of the worst experiences possible, right? So to say that, it's fine for life to essentially get tortured and then have to overcome their own survival instincts, their fear, their terror, and maybe their mental and physical disabilities, or their age restrictions, like their babies, and then do some terrible act to themselves of self-harm. It's just monstrous, basically.
Well, I think that if we're saying that like a violation of agency is the thing that's morally disagreeable here, then people who want to live being killed is also a violation of agency.
But if violation of agency is something you care about, then life is the biggest violator of agency and consent, right? It violates your consent when it forces you to exist, and then throughout the entire life, your consent is being violated, horrifically, and then you still want to live, but even that consent gets violated when you die at the end of your life, right? So extinction is about preventing all of these terrible things.
Yeah, but you have to violate the consent of people to do so. Most people want to live.
Well, the police constantly violate the consent of criminals, right? So
Yeah, but look, you're making a descriptive statement when you're saying that. I'm not saying that I agree with the violation of consent in all cases just because that's what happens to be the case right now, right?
Can you ask that again?
Okay, like when you say but the police do that, that's not addressing what I'm saying, because I'm not saying that that's like morally justified, right?
You don't think that police stopping criminals is morally justified?
Uh, not, well, I mean, it depends on the laws that they're like enforcing, of course, but like we're talking about like moral principles in a vacuum. Like we're talking about all else being equal, should consent be garnered before you do something? And like, yeah, that would be great. But then when you talk about like other things in the background of that, that's going to be a little bit different.
If freedom is essentially what you're saying, right? Causes is a threat to others, then it's a bad thing.
Yeah, but there is no freedom without experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bad thing.
So you're saying freedom as a whole is a bad thing?
I read an article yesterday about, some kids kidnapped a cat and started torturing it to death, right? They had the freedom to do that. It's not a good thing.
Yeah. Well, then, okay, then you could just say that freedom at best is morally neutral because it can be applied, and because like freeing a slave would be a good thing, but you know, the freedom to kidnap or whatever and do those things, like that's a negative execution of freedom.
It's it's an unfair and bad risk and threat to the victims, which is what's happening to them. They're being tortured as a result, right? So it's not fair to them, and the worst sufferers need the help the most, right? They need the most moral consideration.
Yeah, to be rescued and
But that's
put
not
into their
realistic.
own.
It's not plausible. It's not feasible.
It's not plausible or feasible to guarantee that no life will ever arise again.
Why?
Okay, because there are certain sets of natural laws that are in place that essentially make life inevitable given enough time. There are wet dry cycles, there's a supply of usable energy, and there are planets that operate within habitable zones that facilitate solvents, right? And over time, there will be a lot of chemistry that takes place. Eventually, that chemistry will result in autocatalytic loops, which eventually becomes life, you know?
Maybe we just throw all the planets into the sun or something. Who knows, right?
Throw
But
all the planets into the sun, all of them.
well, look. Essentially, you ever heard the thing about like any sufficient technology appears to be magic, right? Again, who are we to say what's possible and not possible, right? We should explore every possibility of suffering prevention, right? We don't have all the answers now. You don't. I don't. Nobody does. Humanity is at the beginning of its venture into science and technology.
Okay, but we've learned some things since we've started doing science and tech, right?
Some things, yeah.
Yeah. So we've learned that we've learned about metastability, we've learned about autocatalysis, we've learned about evolution and abiogenesis, and we've learned that there are more stars in the galaxy than there are grains of sand on Earth. Right? There are probably more galaxies in the universe than there are grains of sand on the Earth. And if we know this, then you're trying to set out for applying a moral project to get rid of all life. I don't think you would hold that this solar system would be acceptable. I think that you would hold it for the entire universe, that there should be no life, that it should exist, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm saying if we have the resources to ensure that no life exists anywhere in the universe, then I'm sure that we would also have a similar requirement of resources to ensure that everyone who is here, whether we establish a quota, like a birth quota or whatever, we would also have the resources to ensure that everyone can live a life free or nearly free of suffering. It seems like one of those is obviously preferable to the other.
Preferable to who? The lucky ones, right? So,
To everyone.
not if you're saying that there's going to be victims, right, and a risk of victims.
Well, I don't think a non-zero number of victims justifies ending all life, especially if there are a non-zero number of people who want to continue living.
The thing is that suffering is so extreme that it's unacceptable, right?
In all cases?
I mean, it's so extreme that it's beyond the realms of acceptability, basically.
Well, you qualified a distinction between suffering and not suffering earlier when you said that if everyone was in heaven, but every once in a while someone stubs their toe, that would be an acceptable state of affairs that would not warrant extinction, right?
Yeah, but if the only risk is stubbing your toe, then that's a different question, and that seems like a contradiction of a hypothetical, really, because again, like you would need godlike powers to actually grant true safety and certainty of safety, right? So, like I said earlier, if that comes along, then yeah, we definitely have to think about changing our mind. But doesn't seem realistic. It's not coming tomorrow. Extinction is already possible, right? Prevention of extreme suffering is already possible. Clicking your fingers like Thanos and just everyone just gets raptured into heaven. If we can do it, then yeah, we would do it maybe, yeah. But that seems like it's either never going to happen or a very long way off.
Right. As is getting everyone on board with mass extinction.
Not necessarily. You see, most people, their brains are powered by what pizza to choose tonight. We have infinite victims depending on us, so we have to take it more seriously.
Alrighty. Well, I think I'm going to head out, but it was good talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Okay, who's next? Tata, how's it going?
Yes, sir.
How do?
Doing okay. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks. Do you have any questions?
I have questions. Are you going to be in the extinction?
Who can say, right? I can't predict the future. I don't have a magic ball.
That would be all. Are you suffering in any way?
Yeah.
In which way?
I mean, that's personal, but yeah, everyone suffers, right?
Okay, yes, everyone suffers. But I mean, doesn't that seem like that's... I didn't choose to be born, neither did you, right?
Right.
Okay, so like that's not not free will. And I think that anyone's choice is based on somebody else's choices. So I don't think anyone's ever made a full choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's the world is just a bunch of dominoes, right? A series of dominoes going click, 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 and this is where we are in the current domino game, right?
Yeah. So would you say that suffering depends on the person and their state of mind to accept that that's a sufferable thing?
No.
No?
So like suffering isn't something, that you've thought about and rationalized and, developed theories on. A baby being tortured isn't trying to, philosophize about it. They're just screaming in agony.
Well, does it know it?
Yes.
Because I don't think a baby knows it because it's not going to remember it until a certain age. So I don't think it has suffered at all.
So you don't think babies feel pain or suffer?
Well, I don't think they remember it, but I think that you can't have suffering if you don't have the memory of it.
So does that mean it's okay to just go and find a baby and torture it?
Well, like morally, I mean, I don't think a person should find that okay, but I think some societies and ideas of that might be okay to some people.
So you think it is okay to torture babies because they don't remember it?
I didn't say that. I said I think some people think that.
Do you think that?
No, I don't think it's right to hurt anything.
I agree.
I don't think that it's right to do something to something that you don't think it's right to do to yourself.
Yeah, fair enough.
So do you think it's right?
I mean, the thing is, right, decisions being taken for other life forms is the absolute standard. It's reality, right? It's not some crazy new concept. It's absolutely the building blocks of reality and society and nature and life and everything. The government decides for you, your parents decide for you. We're constantly making decisions for others, right? Or having decisions made for us. When we take a pet to the vet and have it euthanized because it's suffering, it probably doesn't want to be euthanized because of its survival instinct. It could be, in absolute agony with no hope, and it would still, try and escape from the attacker or whatever, right? Because it doesn't have the understanding to know what's going on.
Right. So you're saying that it's better to end all suffering, to hurtle all the planets into the sun.
We're not saying that that's exactly how we're going to do it. There's millions of different ways that it could be done. We don't know how it's going to be done. We have to research the best way to do it. But yes, we think that, zero tolerance on suffering is a good thing, and no more victims. No one should have to suffer just so that some people can have fun, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's like, how can you have suffering without non-suffering? How can you have is there any way that we could have non-suffering? 100% non-suffering, like your stub toe in heaven.
I mean, like, it's difficult, right? It's very unrealistic at the minute. I mean, again, if godlike powers become the norm, then things might be different. But at the minute, if I have a child, I can't guarantee it's going to have a good life, but I can not have it and guarantee it's not going to have a good life.
Right. What I'm saying is, inside the brain, all right, there is receptors that control pain, correct?
You can't just remove pain receptors, because sentient life forms need positive motivators, like I like the look of that, I want it, and they need negative motivators, like, oh, that's hot, I shouldn't touch that, or oh, I've just broke my leg or something. If you don't have any pain, then you'll essentially break all your bones. You'll just,
Have you always thought this? For some reason, I lost the signal.
There you go, pick them up.
I lost the signal.
Good.
I'm sorry. I lost the signal.
It's probably my internet being rubbish.
It was mine. I went outside. I was trying to get away from my wife.
Yeah.
He likely calls me suffering. But that's funny.
Yeah,
right?
no, it's my internet is causing me suffering. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Thank you. Are you an atheist?
Yeah.
All right. Have you been an atheist your whole life?
Pretty much, yeah.
So you don't believe in anything, like, where do you think the universe came from? It just popped into existence?
I mean, it is a great question. I don't know the answer. It's possible that it's just always existed, right? Who knows?
I think it's in our head. I think it's a perception.
You mean like a simulation?
Yeah. Which would make us God.
No, it has to be Jesus.
Yeah, even if it turned out to be a simulation or something like that, people like myself would still want to try and end as much suffering as possible. We can't be sure that it's a simulation. There could be real victims, so we still have to take it seriously. And even if it did turn out to be a simulation, what greater goal could there be than ending as much suffering as possible?
You're saying ending suffering. Okay. So there's people in nursing homes and they're suffering. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, like, my grandmother, she passed away from dementia, and, the last few, years of her life were just terrible, right? And I do think she would have been better off with euthanasia, because I was there every single day with her, and I saw her suffering terribly. And she didn't even know who she was.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. I mean, so you think that, like, that if they unalive themselves, then they're better off. And
Yes.
I do agree to an extent, but I mean, if it can be fixed, I think it should be fixed.
No, what he did though.
Yeah, like I say, if we can click our fingers and fix it magically, then we would do it. But doesn't seem realistic at the minute. We'll hold out for it, and we'll definitely be open to it. But in the meantime, we have to work with what is realistic and what is feasible, which is extinction, right, and preventing suffering.
How many people have you prevented suffering?
Well, it's hard to say, right? Because if our mission is successful, even if it's hundreds of years from now. So, I mean, most activists in our movement, we don't expect to see the results of our activism in our lifetime. But if the mission is successful, then we would have, helped it happen faster, essentially. So potentially we could be helping lots of victims.
And what are you doing to further your mission?
Loads of stuff. So I've just created the website recently. The movement's existed for 2 years, so we're fighting desperately to get new activists on board, to grow the movement, to get more resources, to get the message out there, develop the message, develop the movement. Every movement in history has started very small or, disjointed, low level, right? They have to kind of work their way up to achieve their goals. So, we've got a 23 episode and growing podcast, which is, I've just recently uploaded that onto all major platforms. So Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon, Spotify. If you search Pro space Extinction space podcast, Pro Extinction Podcast, you can find it on all major platforms. So yeah, we're desperately fighting to get new activists on board, more resources, grow the movement, make it more possible. And we're also doing science at the same time, right? So we are actually doing the science on extinction as well.
I'm trying to figure out like how you would know that you ended all suffering if all suffering was ended. How would you benefit from that if all suffering was ended? If no one else was here, if nothing was here, how would you know?
So, I mean, you'd either need to know in advance and have like a high degree of certainty that, a sufficient degree of certainty that your plan was going to work, or you could potentially stay around yourself. Humans might need to stay around and things worked out. Trust that mission to robots in the future, right? So
you probably need robots.
If we can create robots that definitely don't suffer, look into it. Say again?
Yeah, I think you would definitely need robots because
yeah, just give me 1 second. I'm just going to just 2 seconds.
Stop smoking, go.
And artificial intelligence are definitely going to be a big resource. So yeah, we're definitely looking into that.
Yeah, I mean, because if you miss one planet, I mean, aren't we living in a multiverse or something like that?
I don't think there's any evidence of that yet, but if that turns out to be the case, then that just means that the mission has gotten bigger. If you've ever seen the TV show Loki, then they have a whole agency to control timelines in the multiverse. I mean, I'm definitely not saying that I believe in that, but I am saying that if somehow that gets proven to be real, then, if our moral obligation is extended, then we would try and serve it.
But wouldn't you want to be here to witness it?
I mean, extinctionists only care about the greater good, right? So we're people that have sort of given up our selfish needs and desires for others, essentially. So, we would prioritize them at all costs. That's all we care about. We care about others more than ourselves.
What country are you from?
England. United Kingdom.
Okay. We're over here in America.
Howdy.
Howdy. I don't think England suffers.
That would be nice. But, we don't want to take that risk, right?
No.
I suppose that's your opinion and I can respect it. Okay, I have to go because I have to go to work.
My doctor's
It was really good talking to you.
Okay.
I hope you have a good day.
You too.
All right, man.
Okay, the show continues, right? Who's next? Doesn't look like it. Yeah, it probably is. Yeah. Doesn't look good. Okay. My internet is maybe giving me some mercy. Right. Okay. Here we go. I'm trying to get someone on. I'm refreshing my internet in the background to check it's working. Lagging. Oh, I've got two people on. Sorry, guys.
Hey.
My internet's really trouble.
Yeah, you're lagging a bit.
Yeah. So, should we do one at a time, or do you both want to stay in?
Don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine.
Ooh,
All right,
you're
double
frozen.
team me. DP me. Let's go.
Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I wanted to say, like to end suffering, it would cause a lot of suffering in itself.
Yep. Could do.
So,
Could do.
do you not see a big issue with that?
No, not really.
How?
Not a good thing, but because the bigger amount of suffering takes priority, right?
How do you know that ending suffering won't cause more suffering than originally existed?
I mean, we just have to try and do what's best, right?
So it is a risk.
Not really. I mean, if I, don't have a child, then I'm guaranteeing it doesn't have a bad life, right? There's no risk there, right?
So how do you plan to end all suffering?
Yeah, so we're growing the movement to make it possible, right? To find the answers to those questions, to research, to do the research, to do the implementation. You can't do that each day that goes by. So it makes it easier, basically. But primarily, we're growing the movement to make.
But right now, what would you
Say again?
choose to end suffering, like, right now? Like, what would you do? How
What
would you
if
do it?
I had a magic wand?
No, I mean, with what's realistic.
Well, that's why we need to grow the movement, to find out what is realistic. It's like saying, how would you cure cancer
what-
now? You know, how can you couldn't possibly answer that, right? You'd have to research it and try to cure it.
I mean, like, have you fully thought through the fact of like how you would end it, and like if you did, then how much suffering in itself it would cause? You don't know the answers to that, right?
We can only do our best, but you know, we have thought about it. Euthanasia, for example, is usually quite painless. We may come up with would be painless, and even if there were pain, it's impossible to cause more pain than you'd be preventing, so it would still be the right thing.
So you would euthanize people that wanted to exist.
We would do whatever it took to try and reduce the threat and risk of suffering to zero, basically, for the sake of those that would suffer if we don't.
But that is murder, no?
I mean, the police, have to shoot people all the time in defense of others, right? Would you say that's murder?
No, but these people haven't caused suffering. A lot of them probably haven't intentionally caused suffering. So you would euthanize, for example, like babies and kids.
So it's not just so that they don't cause suffering to others. They could suffer themselves as well, and they're not really capable of making that decision for themselves, right? They're just too optimistically blind, and that's why again the world is run by idiots, right? We've got violence, hatred, war. Point to some sort of sign that the world is on track to the right direction, right? It's very difficult to do so.
Do you not think that euthanizing someone that wants to stay alive is the same as forcing someone to stay alive that doesn't want to be alive?
Great question. So, but someone that's imprisoned in life is has chronic pain, maybe mental illness, physical illness. They're just being tortured pointlessly, and they can't get out of it, right? So
you cut off for the first half.
The safety of non-existence. Yeah. The safety of non-existence is a good thing, right? There's no suffering there. There's no pain. You're just guaranteed to be safe, right? But essentially, we're in a world that is almost like hell, right? So we're trying to save life from being in hell, basically.
Yeah, so it's okay for the people that don't and won't exist, but for the people that do currently exist, they've got to deal with the consequences, which is a lot of suffering. But I think that I agree with you that people are selfish, and I think that's a big reason why a movement like this would never work.
Well, it will be difficult, right? But we're for the sake of the victims. They're depending on us.
But you're causing victims by helping the victims.
Sometimes you have to cause a bit of suffering to prevent a larger amount of suffering, and much. It's such a tiny, infinitesimal amount of suffering that you even could cause in the worst case scenario with extinction, in comparison to billions of years that you're preventing.
You're also preventing a lot of beauty and good and stuff like that. Like, I don't know if somebody should be able to have the choice to decide for other people, because I do agree that I think
That
that
beauty will still
there should
exist.
be.
The sun will still rise and still set. That beauty will still exist. But in a suffering-free world, which couldn't get better than that.
Yeah, but you admitted that you do have to cause a lot of suffering to like prevent it forever.
Not necessarily, no. I mean, again, like euthanizing animals is usually painless, right? Or close to painless.
Well, yeah, but the lead up to the euthanizing is the issue, isn't it?
Exactly. You're essentially pointing to why they danger, right? So that's agreeing with my position.
No, I'm saying, like, if somebody wants to live, right, and you want to euthanize everyone to prevent future suffering, the issue is that you're forcing people to die. You know what I mean? Like, the actual method might be painless, but you're forcing somebody to die, billions of people. It's a big issue, dude.
Do you think? But if it can be painless and then just being transitioned to the safety of non-existence, right? Then what's so bad about that? If it prevents, you're not.
Well, how would you do it so nobody knew about it?
I mean, there's some theories out there, but we can't guarantee that people will know about it, won't know about it, or whatever. We can just simply do our best, essentially. Now, we prefer to do it in the best way possible, and that's what we're going to work towards, right? What else can you do?
Do you genuinely believe in all of this? Like, just genuinely?
When the movement approached me last year and invited me to join, they said, we're going to work towards, ending all suffering, right?
You
The
realize
suffering is
that's not
terrible.
realistic.
We need to just yeah. That's just your opinion, bro.
I mean,
Right?
it is the truth, though. I mean, really, you have to cause a lot of suffering to prevent future suffering, and you don't know how much that will cause, and you don't know what would happen if you didn't do that. I mean, it's just a big issue. Like, it's a lot of what ifs,
Yeah. There's just so many victims depending on us that it justifies a lot of things.
Anyway, I'll let Max take it away, because obviously I've been hogging the mic and stuff. But yeah, I appreciate the conversation, dude.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. No problem. I thought you raised some really good ideas. But when I saw the caption here on TikTok, and thank you for having me on, by the way, I thought this was a very fascinating thought experiment. And if you really do think about it, the amount of suffering in this world is extraordinary. It is beyond our comprehension. Life has been on this planet for 3.5 billion years already, and the amount of suffering is unimaginable. I mean, ever since the first cell, life has to destroy itself in order to survive, right? We have to eat. We have to eat plants and animals for our own survival, right? So this is in itself it's an interesting position. But some of the other callers have alluded to this, and I just want to put some ideas out here. I can't really say I completely agree with this perspective. And one of the big ideas is who would pull the trigger? Who would ultimately have to decide? You have addressed this in that you feel that the best and brightest, the most rational people would rise to the occasion and make a judicious decision. But however, but I think back to like our history, and I hate to bring this type of comparison up, and I'm not necessarily making this type of comparison, but just as a thought, you have people like Hitler or Stalin who also had their movements, which started small. These people thought they had the best way forward, and their best way forward involved the killing of millions of people. So, there's movements and people think we have the best way forward. And I think it is pretty clear. I think we could all agree we don't really have all the answers. The problem with like utilitarianism, these types of calculations, we just don't have the information to, remotely even, put something like this into perspective and pull the trigger on it. I mean, this is just there's so many unknowns here. It's to me. And the other thing, I do think there are some aspects of life where life is basically what is behind our eyes is the universe. We are all sentient beings are the universe experiencing itself. That's what I think, and there is a lot of value to that, a lot of significance. And granted, the problem of suffering, and again, we can't even comprehend the level of suffering that has existed with life and going forward. I don't know, maybe an anti-natalist position might be a little bit better of a course of action, perhaps, if people feel that strongly about it. But in the end, I have a really hard time with this concept. I do think it's a fascinating thought experiment. So that's really all I wanted to put out there. So yeah, thank you.
Do you want me to respond, or
yes,
did
please.
you just?
Yeah, sure. Please.
Yeah. So, you're talking about like Hitler and stuff, but we're not. Most realistically, we would work towards zero suffering for animals first, right? So we're against harming humans at the minute. We're against self-harm, acts of violence. We need a strong and healthy and happy and powerful humanity going forward as the vehicle for ending animal suffering and for supporting the project of ending as much suffering in the universe as possible. So, humanity has a really good reason to exist. Humanity is safe at the minute. So unless we find a way to, delete the universe like that, which again, maybe, right? We would do it. But, unless that happens, which maybe it's less realistic, then humanity has nothing to worry about for quite a long time.
I think that's a valid point. I think you've bridged the gap very nicely, actually, with that. So yeah, I mean, you're not talking about pressing a button right now and creating the extinction of all humanity this minute, but certainly is a worthwhile concern. I don't know. I was thinking maybe we could approach this from the other end of still trying to create that and a type of utopian Earth. As much as we can go approach it from that direction, perhaps, but these are fascinating questions. I think it's a brilliant thought experiment, and I just wanted to throw a few ideas out there. And like I said, thank you for having me, and yeah, I will continue to listen. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for coming on. Great. Okay, who's next? Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Sorry, I don't know if you hear my background right now. I'm just walking a bit.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, yeah. So I guess the main question that I wanted to get out of the way first was, do you view suffering as the only morally relevant element?
It's certainly the most important one. If we've got room left over to make people happy, then yeah, definitely. So extinctionists, for example, believe that the activists need to stay healthy, happy, and we feel the same for humanity. That the better off the vehicle for ending suffering is, the better, essentially. So we would love everyone to be happy, improving conditions as much as possible. On the journey to ending suffering.
Okay, yeah. I asked you that because it sounds like a lot of your moral framework is based on like basically negative utilitarianism. And I'll say right now, like if you view suffering as the only really relevant thing, there's nothing that I could say to change your mind, because I would actually agree with you if you view the world that way, but I don't.
Okay, I mean, we like to look at the bigger picture and consider everything, essentially.
Yeah, so I guess I'll give a little bit of background. I think that I commented a little while ago, or maybe it was a day or two ago or something, and I mentioned kind of like a little bit of where I'm coming from, because people are going to disagree with you from like all angles, like there are a lot of reasons someone might disagree with you from a religious perspective or whatever, but so I'm like an ethical vegan. I'm pro voluntary natalist, so that means like pro people having kids if they want to, and then they have the knowledge to, and they're able to like make a good life for those kids. I think I'm also pro right to die, because I think you mentioned before, people can't consent to come into the world. Is that accurate to your position?
They can't consent to come into the world, and it's a myth that anyone can just leave anytime they want to, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pro right to die. I'm very aware that there are a lot of obstacles in the way right now, a lot of political obstacles to both suicide and euthanasia. I'm pro seriously deregulating that. I do think that you should have to at least talk to someone first, because there is a lot of data showing that most suicide attempts are like impulsive, and a lot of people regret them later. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, I'm actually grateful for my life now, and that's later on. So I don't think that you should just be allowed to take it like right then and there, talk someone down from the ledge type of thing. But if people are sure, then I think they should be allowed to. I'm also in favor of
Yeah, Sarah, you're having extreme audio issues, and you're tanking the viewership of the stream, actually.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, okay, if it continues to be an issue, just let me know and then kick me off. It's okay, because I noticed that you were back online, and then like it was not the greatest time for me, but like I wanted to talk with you before it ended again. I know the last live stream ended.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically like that, and then I think what it comes down to is if your kid is under the age of, teenagers should have more rights than they do right now. But
I'm sorry to boot you off, Sarah, but your audio issues are far more extreme than you realize. Try again later. I'd be happy to have you again. Okay, let's just get someone else.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. So I wanted to kind of talk through a couple points. The first thing, I think, this whole movement seems to stand on the assumption that, death of the body would lead to the death of experience. So you've said non-existence, right? I think a perpetual non-existence is just straight up wrong. And here's why. If we're alive right now, which we can all say we are, right? Then that means that the causes and conditions of an experience exist in nature, right? Presently. And if that was brought to an end, let's assume that that cause and condition was a body, right? If it was brought to an end, then we wouldn't be here to experience, right? It would cut that off, right? So there would be no present experience. But the thing is, if we are not there to experience, then it doesn't matter how much time passes with ultimate reality existing. When the causes and conditions of, experience arise, this consciousness could arise again as well. And we wouldn't notice, any break in time, just like, going to sleep and then waking up, you just, are there with the next experience, right? So I feel like we would just die, and then whatever length of time passes, there would be other causes and conditions, given nature's always, perpetually changing. And this does assume that, these conditions would arise with our particular mind as well. But I think that's a good assumption, given, like spiritual beings and, saints and sages of the world, specifically in Buddhism, that actually have a plan to bring suffering to a permanent end. These folks say that there is something that transcends this whole entire domain of experience. So it's like a completely different shore that isn't bound to conditions. Feel free to address any of those points.
So I would say that there's no evidence that, consciousness returns, right? I would also say that, the fewer, the smaller number of meat sacks we have running around that can accept consciousness would be a benefit as well. And that, even if what you're saying is true, we'd probably be better off not taking that, even if there's a possibility of what you're saying is true, we'd be better off not just, taking that risk, essentially.
Yeah, I would like to debate that. I think that the conditions here on Earth would be far more agreeable than the potential of what, experiences could be in reality. I think, if you take like all whole numbers and all real numbers, you can assign like, 1 to 1, 1 to, or 2 to 1.1, 3 to 1.2, etc. So you have two infinite sets, and one is significantly larger than the other infinite set, right? But the thing is, like, at the moment of death, if there are any conditions in nature for consciousness to arise in the domain of experience, then that is a 100% certainty that it would happen instantly relevant to that, or relative to that being's continuum of experience. So it doesn't matter, how many opportunities there are for consciousness. If we destroyed all humans, whether it happens here on Earth or somewhere else, none of that is actually relevant in, the entire scope of, nature and causes and conditions. So I think, even looking here on Earth, there's like disabilities, birth defects, things like that. There are really harsh lives that people can be born into. But I think for the most part, wherever you find yourself, you have an opportunity to kind of find your way. And, you can choose to, pursue a particular path to happiness. And again, there's opportunities, for example, with religion, and I would specifically point to Buddhism to bring a permanent end to suffering. So with these opportunities that I would think are precious, and, the potential being there that people who have walked these paths say, hey, this path does lead to where, our teacher said it would lead, etc. Especially the ones that can be experienced here on Earth, like Buddhism, enlightenment. Yeah, I think that it's just significantly more agreeable and less suffering than that potential.
Okay. So from, and the physicality, right? And that it's easy to kind of see this as well, because as experiences change, as your brain changes, you get older, whatever it is, your mind changes as well. So that it responds to the physical reality of your brain, right? So in that sense, your brain is your mind and responsible for your mind, and most likely your consciousness as well. Yeah, we're talking about preventing torture, preventing babies from being abused. And so consciousness will reform somewhere else. And if it isn't reformed somewhere else in dangerous conditions, then that makes extinction make even more sense, right? Sorry, my internet's kind of rubbish. Can't be Buddhists.
Sorry,
So
I was cutting
that's
in and out.
unrealistic for the vast majority of life. And even for Buddhists, right? If you let me know if I'm cutting in and out as well.
I think
I
the
don't think
chat was saying it was you. I don't know for sure.
it's probably me. Can you hear me?
I think I'm okay now, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So even Buddhists can be tortured, right? And I don't think there's evidence that every single Buddhist is immune from pain and suffering.
Yeah. So I'll address a couple of those points. You mentioned it makes even more of a point for extinction if their beings are going to arise elsewhere and experience other things, right? Which would be true if there were like a finite universe, where this would happen. But from all that we can tell currently, it seems like the universe is pretty much boundless, that it's, expanding, in this thing that we don't understand fully, and that it seems to, there are some arguments that it's like black holes within black holes within black holes, and that every universe is just within eternal black holes, things like that. So it seems, for all intents and purposes, that at least from what we can tell, there's no defining our universe to some constraints. That being said, I think that kind of eliminates that possibility as far as like ultimate reality. This set of experiences and conditions arose. So I would think that, eliminating that as a possibility eternally is just not possible. And then again, for whether it would be good or not, I would think it would be harmful. Again, specifically because I think that there is, something that is agreeable, experienced as something wonderful, such as nirvana, that is not subject to conditions. And the only way to get to this other shore would be taking up a body and mind. So this would be something that would have to be work done to sort of purify the defilements that exist on the level of the self.
So would be right that there could be that we should have as much life as possible.
Am I interrupting you? Sorry, your internet was. Yeah, I did want to address the pain point
Did
as
you
well.
hear my point?
No, sorry, it was cut out the whole time. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying, essentially, we need more evidence of what you're suggesting, right? We can immediately say that preventing a rapist from spawning a child in his dungeon and molesting it to death is probably for the best, right? So preventing animals from being born and eaten alive as babies with parasites and having their eyes picked out by birds and stuff while they're still alive, probably for the best, right? So we have to go with what seems like the best thing at the time, essentially. Now, if there's evidence of all of this spirituality, then we could consider it, right?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think that there is enough evidence, at least here on Earth, because the practice of, for example, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, like the gradual training of Buddhism, you can go do that in like 2 weeks if you know what you're doing. Like maybe 3 months if you don't know what you're doing and you are really disciplined and intent on, figuring this stuff out. Like it takes a few months to study, a particular set of knowledge. Like you can also spend that few months practicing, these teachings and see if they do lead to the results that are claimed, which is liberation from this whole entire, to a point where it's not even communicable via like modern language, because that language too is conditioned and bound with, a bunch of perception and different people who lived. But I do see, the value in, removing certain levels of harm, certain degrees of harm. You would think that death would be, a lot better. But then again, that comes back down to, we're kind of assuming one way or the other that there is non-existence, or we're assuming that there is, you know, other causes and conditions for consciousness. And I think there's a lot more evidence that would support that, within nature, there are causes and conditions of consciousness than there would be that support non-existence. I did want to make a quick point about the pain thing. Pain, or at least the suffering of, whatever painful tactile sensation is... Sorry, are you talking? Sorry, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't the internet
but
interrupting you.
Continue.
Oh, go ahead.
Your internet's fine, mine's rubbish. But yeah, I was going to say that, again, like if we can see that a baby's about to be born, forced to exist and be tortured, we're going to try and stop it, right? And unless we have some evidence that they're going to experience worse things as a result of not being born and tortured, then yeah, we should try and stop forced existence and torture, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, people are going to act in ways that they have faith is the best route. If you truly believe that putting an end to this before, this harm happens is going to be a better experience than, that question mark of whatever else, I would think that most beings, if you asked this being, like, hey, do you want death as opposed to this? I think most would say no to that question. And therefore, most of the time, letting, whatever circumstances play out. But you could argue that there's biases, attachments, passions, etc., that are attached to their identity, their ego, their life, etc. But as far as pain, at least, again, pain, I'm sorry, suffering from pain comes from the point where that painful tactile sensation overwhelms your mind and there is resistance to it, right? A regular, like touching the steering wheel, walking, feeling your shoes, even bumping into certain things isn't necessarily painful. But then when that painful or tactile sensation is so strong that it feels, there's this resistance arises between the mind and that contact of that experience, then there's that resistance, that suffering, that I want reality to change. So that's what is eliminated through the Buddhist practice. It's you become equanimous to all possibilities for experience. And with that, there's no resistance to anything. And then therefore, there's no suffering to anything. It's like, your neighbor's bike is getting stolen. You don't really have any skin in the game, right? You aren't really bothered. You might think, that's just your empathy or compassion. So the same thing's kind of true with suffering in Buddhism, right? Imagine you have a bowl of water. If you identify as the bowl, then you're wet with this suffering, right? But if you identify as the outside of the bowl, then it doesn't matter what's happening to the inside of the bowl because, although it's present in your experience, there's no resistance to it. So you're not being touched by any sort of suffering.
Can be Buddhist? Do you think ants?
Do I think
can be
ants?
Buddhists?
I do not. But killing those ants would be taking up like your own intentions of, your own attachments, beliefs, views, and harming another being to, sort of assert your points. So I don't think like destroying life is going to lead to less overall suffering.
Well, I mean, I think that's a crazy way to describe it and extremely almost bad faith. It's such a bad description, right? Trying to euthanize an animal to prevent it from suffering and creating more suffering by reproducing is not, the imposition of will upon it, right? It's from a sense of empathy and safety and responsibility. So thanks for coming on. And yeah, animals can't be Buddhists, so that's just never going to help animals. And, baby humans can't become Buddhists. That's just ridiculous. It's nonsense, effectively. Now, if there was some sort of evidence that, life was going to be born into worse conditions unless it's tortured here on Earth, then we'd be open to it. But, we have to be empiric and scientific. You could say that, the flying spaghetti monster is going to come and torture you if you think about doing extinction, right? But, we can't operate on things like that, right? It's very, I don't know, it's just hard to kind of say that, yeah, we should let that rapist, spawn a child, rape someone, impregnate them, have a baby, and then molest it to death because, maybe that's the best thing for it, right? Just, it doesn't make sense. Now, if you can provide some evidence of something else, then, we can consider it, but we have to go with what's, seems sensical at the time, right? Because if you apply that logic even further, then you could say that, like, you could just justify anything, right? You could say, this person's being tortured, but maybe we shouldn't stop it, It's essentially just looking for any excuse not to prevent suffering and to justify suffering, to validate suffering. So that's, you could come up with infinite excuses or unproven reasons or potential reasons to not help victims. You could walk past someone on the street that's getting stabbed and say, maybe if I help him, then God will punish him even worse, right? It's just not a practical way to go about life. It doesn't sound very responsible. I mean, you know, if we manage to create an AI that's, an ASI, a super intelligence or something, then it will maybe be able to kind of consider these things more than we can. But at the minute, the best we can do is say, look, this baby is going to be forced to exist and suffer and be eaten alive and killed. Let's prevent that, right? It is an interesting idea though. I think a lot of people kind of resonate with that sort of possibility to some extent. And I'll even admit that I do. It's an interesting idea. I suppose my responsibility for the victims is piquing my interest on it. And we should definitely research consciousness and how it arises, and look more into it. Definitely, it's a great question of, can you definitely prove that consciousness only arises in the physical form, or it's actually a great question as well, because what decides who is who, right? Why am I me and not someone else, and vice versa? Why wasn't I born as an animal, or a monkey, an ant, or whatever? Why was my consciousness put into this? Now, we could be looking at it the wrong way by asking that. It might just be that actually, your consciousness is just in your physical body, and that it's not the other way around. He's suggesting that consciousness may exist and, sneak its way into your ear when you're born or something. I'm dramatizing it, but it's quite possible that it's the opposite, and that consciousness only exists during the physicality and your existence in your physical form, right? That it doesn't exist before you're born, and it doesn't exist after you're born. So that seems more likely to be the reality. But yeah, we're open to considering it. Now, again, like, the thing about the extinction movement is, we're at the start of this, okay? And as we get bigger and have more resources, we'll be more able to sort of answer these questions and look into them. It's not a question I would say that we should ignore. It's an interesting one, for sure. But I would definitely say that, we have to go with what's obvious until otherwise, right? Preventing babies from being forced to exist and be tortured to death is just obviously a good thing, right? You can't really convince us otherwise unless you got some sort of proof. People are asking about the movement in the chat. I will get another guest on in a second. If you're more interested in the movement, you can check us out on our website, proextinction.com. You can join us on Discord and become an activist, or ask us questions by searching Abolish Suffering Discord on Google, and it's the first result. But you can also read all about our manifesto, our frequently asked questions, and maybe even suggest some new ones to put on there. Get involved. Okay, so let's try and... Oh. Brandon.
Hello, sorry, you just caught me finishing the dishes. Sorry about the noise there.
All right, how you doing?
I'm well, and yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you.
So, I'm interested in this kind of worldview and philosophy you're putting forward from like a first principles basis. If suffering is what you're trying to avoid, is it fair to say that you're utilitarian in some sense?
I mean, we don't describe ourselves as utilitarians, so we would just say that we're extinctionists, and we also describe ourselves as rational empaths.
Yeah, okay.
Which is not a coach.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Totally. So if suffering is at one end of the spectrum of values, it's like the bad end, is there anything on the other end of the spectrum of values?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so why
yeah.
why are you seeking to negate the bad end of the value spectrum by abolishing the spectrum instead of maximizing the good end of the spectrum? Is that not an option?
Yeah, I mean, we can do both, right? But ultimately, there's no realistic way apart from extinction to prevent victims and suffering, right?
I mean, I suppose conceivably it's possible that like genetic engineering in the next couple hundred years is able to produce humans that only experience positive mental states. Like, I don't know the mechanisms by that. I'm no neuroscientist. But like, what if AI were able to do that? Would that solve the problem that you're trying to solve or not?
So, the majority of victims we want to help are animals and non-human lives. But
okay, so yeah, the humans doesn't tackle it entirely yet. Okay.
Human is still a good question. But the thing is that you can reduce the risk of suffering, but unless the risk is zero, then you're allowing the potential of the victims and probably the guarantee of it, right? So that's unfair to the victims. It's wrong. It's unacceptable. So we wouldn't allow. We don't agree with letting people have fun at the direct expense of babies getting tortured and stuff like that.
I get the logic you're putting forward, but obviously it's not the case that like any piece of joy I experience is directly equating to the suffering that any particular individual might have, right? Like, I'm not directly like leeching joy by means of causing suffering, am I? Or do you think that I am doing that to some degree, like we all are?
Oh, we all are. I mean, farmed animals, right? Agriculture, child slaves making our iPhones or our clothing, whatever, right? Suffering is everywhere at all times. Essentially, it's unavoidable, really. So but yeah, we have a zero tolerance on suffering and victims, right? Which is what should be the case.
So yeah, so you're not utilitarian because it's not like you're trying to balance a scale. It's just no suffering allowed.
Yeah, we would say that it's about optimizing all conditions for all life. And if that means protecting them from being forced to exist and be tortured to death as babies, then yeah, we should reduce the risk of that happening to zero. And you can't do that without extinction, essentially. So you can improve conditions for other life forms, but if they're going to keep reproducing and, their kids are, eating each other alive or...
Oh, I think you've lagged. You're frozen for me.
It's unacceptable. Yeah, my internet's been dodgy. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back. You're back.
Yeah, so you can reduce the risk of suffering, right? But if you're doing that instead of ending the risk of suffering, then it's unfair to the victims and it's wrong.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that the kind of self-preservation instincts that humans and most animals have are ultimately selfish in the the ultimate balance of things? Okay.
Yeah, it's not because they're bad people. It's because nature made them that way.
Yeah. I'm not hearing that like judgmentally. I hear you. I hear you. Are you familiar with David Benatar and his "Better Never to Have Been" stuff? How related is your worldview to his stuff, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, he's like an antinatalist, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with antinatalists is that, they've realized that the world is too dangerous to bring their own child into it, but they won't help other children be safe from it. So they just, it's a passive cop-out almost, right? It's opting out of the system instead of fighting the system.
Okay. Do you see any redemptive mechanisms that could be called upon or implemented instead of abolition of being?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we would say that only 100% safety is acceptable, right? If there's any risk of a bad life, then that's completely unacceptable. So even if you do have designer babies running around and stuff, and they don't feel as much pain or they don't get diseases as often, that could still go wrong, right? What if someone kidnaps them and develops a way to torture them, right? So as technology improves, it works both ways. It's a two-way street. Criminals also get that technology, and so 100 years from now, we might have better medicines, but we'll also have much better torture methods.
I hear you. Is there any way that we could balance it? Like, if you had the ability to guarantee that one being would have an eternal, blissful, perfect life, would you like, if you had that ability? I don't know how. This is purely hypothetical, but if you did, would that be a redemptive thing that would be worth existing or not?
Yeah, we would say that would be like the minimum standard to consider creating life and forcing it to exist, right? One way to think of it is that essentially we're in hell right now. The lucky ones don't perceive it as hell, but for the animal babies being eaten alive, the humans with chronic depression and illness, it is hell. If heaven was somehow realistic, and it was so good that we thought, everyone needs to experience this, then yeah, maybe we could consider that, but we would need, literal, absolute God tier.
Yeah. That's in the hypothetical. It would need to be God tier,
right?
Yeah.
100% certainty, like. Yeah, we'd be open to considering that. Yeah.
So why isn't that the goal instead of extinction?
Because it just doesn't seem as realistic at the minute. If it becomes realistic, then that might change things for sure.
Yeah, I hear you. But I guess if correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like there's three end states.
That comes up a lot.
There's three end states. There's like the suffering of now, and maybe that gets worse. There's like the suffering. There's the neutral, I guess, absence of all suffering and absence of being. And then there's the impractical, perhaps, but like maximization of bliss. And I get the pragmatic, like, let's at least minimize suffering. But it feels like it's aiming too low to me. Like, if we can get to the point, if it's even imaginable, that ultimate bliss via means of who knows what, like uploading our consciousness to the cloud and programming bliss for eternity, if that's even an idea that exists, which it does, we're talking about it, it seems to me that that's the better thing to aim for.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, that sort of omnipotence would be a prerequisite for that, right? And yeah, one interesting thing about let me know if you can't hear me, by the way. Can you hear me?
I can. It's all good. Yeah.
My internet's really dodgy today. Yeah, like one really interesting way of thinking about it is that we like to think that extinctionists have the largest responsibility of anyone in history, because in a sense we have virtually infinite victims of torture depending on us. So the thing is, yeah, that sort of drive and responsibility is going to push us towards trying to be as powerful as possible for the sake of extinction and the victims. And obviously all of humanity has been about progress, scientific progress, technological progress. So I would say that working towards helping the victims may well, if omnipotence is possible, then we think that we would be the ones to potentially be more motivated to find it. Maybe. Yes, it's a great question.
Certainly in
for sure.
certainly in keeping with the motives that you're putting forward for why you're doing what you're doing. I get that, but I guess the fact that your website is proextinction.com instead of maximizebliss.com, like obviously the methodology, you've kind of settled on the methodology to maximize your values is actually to bring about the ceasing of suffering, as opposed to maximizing the bliss of beings. I get the pragmatism.
Yeah,
I don't think it's
the reason for that is
expression of the motives that even you are saying you have, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even start the movement, but the reason for that is that it just doesn't seem, realistic that we'll achieve omnipotence anytime soon, whereas extinction is already possible, right? We already reduce animal populations, we euthanize them, there's deforestation, which reduces animal suffering. So these things are already real, they're already realistic, they're practical. They're much more practical than being able to just click your fingers and rapture everyone up into heaven, essentially. But yeah, if it's something we could look into for sure.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate that. Yeah, you're not just dismissing the idea. It sounds to me, if I'm trying to get in the headspace that you're putting forward, that the ending of being to minimize suffering, it just sounds like you're aiming too low, man. Like, I know that it's not. I know it sounds impractical, and I don't have the answers, but I'm sure even to bring about extinction has some serious practical, hurdles in the way right now. Lots of them, namely just one is like people's instinct to persevere, to continue to be.
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough one to overcome if this is the solution to the problem. And so they both look like pretty insurmountable mountains. Yes, I think the bliss one is a taller mountain, more insurmountable, but I think it's the higher aim. It's the better aim, surely, right?
I mean, the problem with it is that you would have to be able to just click your fingers, right?
Well, it could be incremental. It could be, in theory, right? If infinite bliss for a near infinite number of beings, because we could continue to procreate, is possible, then it does become utilitarian. But eventually, the amount of joy and bliss would outweigh the suffering infinitely, practically, after enough time.
We will still maintain a zero tolerance policy on using victims as currency, right? And
yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
So yeah, again, I mean, reducing suffering traditionally is at the expense of ending it, right? If you reduce slavery instead of ending slavery, then and you can end it, then it's unfair to the victims. So the same applies, really. Now, like, you know, if tomorrow morning we wake up and, you know, God says, let's rapture everyone, then, yeah, maybe, right? Maybe it would be a good thing. But it just doesn't seem realistic at the minute. And I think we have to work towards, you know, in the meantime, at least, reducing and preventing suffering as much as we can. And yeah, you know, the thing is, extinctionists are people that say that, you know, all of this terrible suffering and forced existence is happening and we should prevent it. Whereas most people are not taking on any sort of responsibility. They're saying the opposite. We should ignore their suffering, allow it, justify it, laugh at it even, right? So someone's got to be responsible for the world, right? You know, Trump isn't going to do it. Do you know what I mean?
I hear you. Yeah, absolutely. I think in order for me to be convinced to take on your position, I think I would need to be convinced that the kind of blissful zero tolerance for suffering existence is in principle impossible. If there's any chance that that is achievable in this world, like by means of ultimate innovation and technology and moral revolution and wisdom, if that's possible at all, then it's worth aiming for. And I would gladly suffer to bring that about for people that aren't me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. Like I say, you know, the movement is based on what seems more realistic and plausible, right? So, you know, we haven't explored becoming God, essentially, because...
Challenge accepted. No, I'm kidding, but you know what I mean.
So, yeah, I mean, we're trying to stay in the realms of, you know, what seems feasible, essentially.
I guess my parting challenge is dream bigger, my friend. I think I'm behind the ethos here, but I think if you can't demonstrate that it's impossible, then that's where we should be aiming, as far as I can see.
I mean, part of it is that we don't want to sort of give people false hope, right? You know, and say we don't need extinction, we don't need to prevent all of this suffering, because optimism actually causes and allows terrible suffering. So that is a big part of the reason, right? But you know, maybe you do have a point, and I will take it under serious consideration. So thank you.
I appreciate it, absolutely. I wish you well, mate. I think one of my kids is waking up. I'll need to go, but all the best. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brandon. Take care. Well, that was an interesting conversation. It's given me a lot to think about, really. But you know, how do you kind of entertain the idea that we should try and become God? You know, it doesn't seem realistic or practical. That's kind of the main problem. Should we consider, you know, include it in our goals or be open to it? The thing is, you know, how many resources are you going to commit to becoming God, right? Or to attaining godlike power? Is it a realistic goal? You know, again, extinction is already practical. It's already feasible. It's a realistic goal, right? Humanity has already made several species of animals go extinct, and that's without even trying. So we're much more capable of doing it now. I mean, so like, I think creating godlike power, like Brandon was talking about, you'd probably have to have an AI to do it, right? That's kind of what everyone is saying already. AI is going to develop into super intelligence. It might make us go extinct. So yeah, we are already looking into extinctionist AIs, but AI is actually still kind of cutting its teeth. It's still very young, still very rubbish, right? So it's a big project that Brandon's suggesting, right? He's suggesting that we should somehow, work towards God tier power. And there's a big decision. Do we do something like that at the expense of trying to work towards something that seems much more practical? So there's a big trade-off involved there. However, if we are essentially making an AI that's rational and the best AI possible, then it might, who knows? It would essentially be covering that base, right? We wouldn't want to program an AI and say, right, you are an extinction bot. We would want it to be the best AI it could be. So in that sense, we could definitely try and cover our bases in that sense, right? And, it probably makes sense as well to work towards a non-biased AI. And, if extinction is the rational conclusion, then the non-biased AI would come to that conclusion as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting concept. And yeah, I think there's a lot to consider there. But again, realistically, we don't want to give people false hope and to essentially give them more reason to say, let people suffer, because we might get raptured into heaven if we let them suffer. So the optimism bias causes and allows a lot of suffering, right? And it's dangerous. So yeah, a lot to consider there. I'm going to go get some food, guys. Thanks for joining us. Again, you're all welcome to join us on the Discord and chat with us and chat with me. Google search Abolish Suffering Discord. It's the top link on Google. Check out our website, proextinction.com. And one last point on that, again, is that our movement is too small to necessarily be able to do all of these things ourselves. I mean, we are looking into doing it already as small as we are, but having more resources would definitely help, right? So we need to grow the movement as big as possible to kind of make being responsible for the world possible. Unless you think Trump is doing a good enough job. But yeah, I'd love to talk to all of you guys about this further. Join our Discord, Google search Abolish Suffering Discord. The link to our Discord is also on our website at the bottom, proextinction.com. Join us for more fascinating conversations like this, and not just fascinating conversations, but actual responsible discussion, right? And, really shaping the future of what is right and wrong and what is the responsible action going forward. So, again, I really appreciate all of the questions that have been asked, like Brandon's question about that. Extinctionists are open-minded people. We try to be open-minded, especially because we have, the responsibility requiring us to be open-minded. So we try not to be closed-minded, and when you have victims depending on you, you have to take all of these questions seriously and to try and expand your thinking. We are by no means perfect. We don't have everything figured out. The movement is new, we're still developing everything like that. So yeah, great stuff. Okay, thank you everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow.